Hi guys. I married Olivia when we were both in our late 20s. It was one of those rare love stories that people talk about, the kind where everything falls into place almost immediately. We met in college at a party that neither of us had planned to attend, but by the end of the night, we couldn't keep our eyes off each other. We were inseparable from that point on. Olivia was everything I could have ever dreamed of. Smart, beautiful, and effortlessly kind. She made me feel like the best version of myself, and I knew from that night forward that I wanted to spend my life with her. Our marriage was simple but filled with love, and for the first decade and a half, I thought it was perfect. I worked as a marketing director for a tech company, and Olivia worked part-time at a local art gallery. We lived in a cozy home on the outskirts of the city, an hour's drive from both of our families. We were content with our life, our routine, and our two beautiful daughters, Grace and Lily. Grace was the older one, 13, and Lily, 10, full of energy and curiosity. Our life was harmonious, and I had no reason to believe anything could shatter it. But as often happens, the cracks began to appear when we least expected them. It wasn't an explosive moment or a sudden affair, but a slow, insidious series of changes. It all started when I came home early one afternoon from work, a day earlier than expected, and found Olivia in the kitchen, looking a little too flustered for someone who had been at home alone all day. I asked her what was wrong, but she brushed it off with a smile, telling me that she'd just been working on some art projects for an upcoming gallery event. There was nothing unusual in that, I thought. But something in her demeanor bothered me. Her eyes didn't quite meet mine, and she seemed distracted in a way that wasn't typical. For the next few weeks, I noticed small inconsistencies. Her phone constantly buzzing, but when I would glance at it, she'd quickly grab it, almost too quickly. She would leave the room to take calls, saying they were just work-related, but I started to sense that something was off. I decided not to jump to conclusions. After all, we'd built a life of mutual trust, right? I kept my suspicions at bay, though they were growing with every passing day. Then came the night that shattered my peace. I had gone out with a few friends from work for a celebratory dinner after landing a big client, and I didn't get home until well past midnight. When I walked through the door, I found Olivia sitting on the couch, her phone in hand, staring at a text message that she quickly shoved into her pocket when she saw me. She was unusually tense, and I could feel the weight of the air between us, thick with unspoken words. I asked her if everything was okay, but she merely nodded, not looking at me. "Just tired," she said, her voice flat. But I could sense something different in her, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what had changed between us. It wasn't the first time I had felt a shift, but it was the first time it felt so palpable. When I finally closed my eyes, I drifted into a restless sleep, only to be awakened by the muffled sound of Olivia's phone buzzing again around 3 a.m. I had to know. I didn't want to, but I had to. My hand shook as I grabbed her phone from the nightstand. I tried to tell myself that I was being paranoid, but when I unlocked it, the first thing I saw was a string of text messages between Olivia and someone named Aiden. My heart dropped. I read the messages over and over, each line sinking deeper into my chest like a cold knife. "Can't stop thinking about you, Olivia. We need to be careful. I don't want to lose you. I'll make it worth your while, I promise." The messages were flirtatious at first, but as I scrolled back, they became more intimate. They were talking about meeting up, about sneaking around, and the promises they made to each other. My blood ran cold. Aiden. Who was he? What had I missed? My mind raced with 1,000 questions. I didn't want to believe it. My hands shook as I set the phone back on the nightstand, my heart pounding so loudly in my chest I thought Olivia might hear it. The next morning, everything felt different. I tried to act normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my world had been turned upside down. Olivia didn't notice the change in me at first, but I couldn't look at her the same way. Every glance, every touch felt suffocating, like I was living in someone else's life. It wasn't long before I confronted her. I couldn't keep living in this fog of uncertainty. That evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I sat her down on the couch. My voice was steady, but inside, I was falling apart. "Olivia, who is Aiden?" I asked. She froze. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I saw panic flicker across her face. Then she quickly looked away, biting her lip, clearly searching for the right words. She didn't speak for a long time, and just when I thought she might deny everything, she turned to me, her face filled with sadness. "I'm sorry, Liam," she whispered. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It's been going on for a while now." My stomach dropped. "How long?" I asked, my voice breaking. 2 months, she said, her voice barely audible. It happened. We were both lonely. I don't know how it started, but I was just so disconnected, and Aiden was there, and he made me feel seen. Like I mattered. And it wasn't planned, but it became something. "I'm so sorry." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The betrayal hit me harder than I could have imagined. I could barely comprehend what she was saying. The woman I had loved for 15 years had been seeing someone else, sneaking behind my back for months. I had no words. I couldn't even look at her. And yet, despite the overwhelming pain, I couldn't help but feel sympathy for her. There was a part of me that understood what she meant by lonely. Our marriage, over time, had become a routine, a pattern of responsibilities and obligations. We had stopped connecting in the way we once had. I hadn't noticed it happening, but she had. In that moment, as she cried and apologized, I knew something had changed in me too. A part of me wanted to hate her, wanted to scream at her for what she'd done, but another part of me, the part that had loved her so deeply, just wanted answers. How had we gotten here? How had everything we'd built come to this? Olivia begged me to understand, to forgive her. But even as she spoke, I knew this was only the beginning. There was more to uncover, more secrets buried beneath the surface. I didn't know how to move forward from this, how to face a life I thought I knew, but that was now falling apart in front of me. The hardest part, though, was realizing that the person who had always been my rock, the person I thought I could rely on no matter what, was the one who had betrayed me. And worse, it wasn't just the affair itself, it was the fact that I hadn't seen it coming. My whole life with her, with our daughters, suddenly seemed like a lie. As the weeks passed, Olivia's career with Ethan Carver grew more demanding. I could see it in her eyes, the excitement, the hunger for success, but also the exhaustion, the pressure that came with it. She was no longer the woman I married. She was becoming someone I didn't fully recognize. It wasn't just her job, it was the world she had stepped into. Ethan was a man of charisma, a politician with a vision that resonated with so many, including Olivia. She admired him in a way I couldn't ignore. At first, I tried to brush it off as a natural professional admiration, but over time, it became clear that Ethan's influence over her was growing. The late nights at the office, the hours spent discussing strategy, the constant buzz of campaign events, it all took its toll on our family life. And I couldn't help but feel like I was losing her all over again. The change wasn't sudden, it was gradual, like the slow shifting of tectonic plates beneath the surface. I started to notice it in small ways, in the little things that had once been part of our routine. Olivia no longer made dinner for the family. Instead, she'd text me on her way home to say she was grabbing something with Ethan and would be late. The girls began to rely on me for everything. Homework help, bedtime stories, the occasional trip to the grocery store. I didn't mind being there for them, but it wasn't the way I imagined our family life. It felt like I was playing the role of a single parent, with Olivia no longer fully present. Even the weekends, once sacred family time, were slipping away. Olivia had become a fixture at fundraisers, rallies, and meetings, leaving me to handle everything at home. I knew she was passionate about her job, and I respected her ambition, but the balance was tipping too far in one direction. I remember one particular Saturday afternoon. It was a rare day when both the girls and I had some time free. Grace had finished her homework early, and Lily had a few hours before her friend came over. We were supposed to go to the park, something we hadn't done in months, but Olivia texted me at the last minute. "Can you take them to the park? I've got to meet Ethan for a last-minute strategy session." "Sorry, I'll make it up to you guys soon." I didn't say anything at first, just put the phone down. I didn't know if I was angry or just resigned to the fact that this had become our new normal. I could hear the sound of Grace's voice calling me from the other room, asking where her mom was, but I didn't have an answer for her. I looked at Lily, who was already pulling on her sneakers, her excitement palpable. We went to the park, the three of us, but something inside me had shifted. It wasn't just Olivia's absence, it was the realization that she wasn't even trying to be present. The more I thought about it, the more it gnawed at me. It wasn't the job itself, it was the way she had let her work consume her. There was always something more urgent, something more important. And I couldn't help but wonder if she was running away from something, maybe even from me. The tension began to show in the way we interacted. When Olivia did come home, she was often too tired to engage. Conversations that used to flow easily between us had become strained, almost forced. I'd ask her how her day went, but her answers were always vague. Busy, exhausting, I'll tell you later. And when I pushed her, trying to talk about how things had been slipping between us, she'd get defensive, her tone sharp. I'm doing this for us, Liam. You're not the only one who's tired. But this job is important to me. I couldn't argue with that. I knew she was doing it for us, at least that's what she said. But I began to feel like I was losing her to a world that didn't include me. Ethan became a constant presence in our lives, even if he wasn't physically there. He was always on the phone with Olivia, always asking her to stay late or attend another event. And though she reassured me that nothing inappropriate was happening, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their relationship than she let on. There were moments, small, fleeting moments, when I saw the way she looked at him, the way she hung on his every word. One evening, after Olivia had been working late again, I sat down with the girls to have dinner, just the three of us. It was a simple meal, pasta, salad, the usual, and we ate in silence. Grace was reading a book, and Lily was telling me about her day at school, but I couldn't focus. My mind kept drifting to Olivia and Ethan. When Olivia finally came home, it was almost 9 p.m. I was cleaning up the kitchen when she walked in, looking weary but still carrying that air of success, the sense of purpose that had come with her new position. "Hey," she said softly, almost apologetically. "I'm sorry I'm late again. I didn't expect the meeting to run so long." I turned to face her, trying to keep my emotions in check. "It's fine," I said, though I didn't feel fine. I could tell she could sense the shift in me, could feel the distance I was putting between us. "You look tired," she remarked, her eyes softening. "I know this isn't easy on you, but we're doing this for the future. For the girls." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to understand. But it felt like she was talking past me, as if she couldn't see how much I was struggling with her absence. I nodded, trying to push down the frustration that was bubbling up inside me. "I get it," I said. "You're doing great. But what about us? What about our family? What about me?" She flinched just slightly. It wasn't a big movement, but I noticed it, the way her body stiffened when I mentioned my own needs. She looked away, taking a deep breath. "Liam, this is temporary. We'll get through it. I promise." I wanted to believe her, but the more she said it, the less convincing it sounded. How much longer would temporary last? I couldn't even remember the last time we had a real conversation, one that didn't revolve around her work. I missed her. I missed the woman I had married, the one who used to sit with me late at night, talking about our dreams. The woman who made me feel like I mattered. Now, I felt like I was just another responsibility she was trying to juggle, another task on her ever-growing to-do list. Things started to unravel when Olivia began missing more family events. A school recital for Grace, a parent-teacher conference for Lily, even simple weekends at the lake, it all became secondary to the campaign. She would promise she'd be there, but there was always an emergency meeting or a last-minute fundraiser that needed her attention. I began to resent Ethan Carver more than I wanted to. Not because I thought he was the cause of our problems, but because he had become the excuse for everything that was slipping through our fingers. And yet, Olivia never saw it. She was too caught up in the idea that everything she was doing was for the family, that the long hours and missed moments were temporary sacrifices for a better future. But all I saw was a woman who was drifting further away, a woman who was losing herself in a job that seemed to demand more than she was willing to give. It all came to a head one evening when Olivia came home to find me sitting at the kitchen table, a rare moment when I was waiting for her. The girls were in bed, and the house was quiet, except for the weight of the silence between us. I didn't know what to say anymore, but I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I need to know, Olivia, I said, my voice steady but filled with a quiet desperation. I need to know if you're still here with us. Or if you've already left, emotionally, for this job, for Ethan? Her eyes flashed with hurt, and for a moment, I wondered if I had crossed a line. But the truth was, I needed to hear it from her. Needed to know if she was still in this with me, or if I was just a bystander to her new life. She looked at me, her face unreadable, and for a long time, neither of us spoke. As the weeks turned into months, it became harder to ignore the subtle signs that things were slipping beyond the point of repair. Olivia's dedication to her new career was undeniable. She was doing well, excelling even. But somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like I was part of that success. It wasn't just the missed family dinners or the late nights. It was the small changes I began to notice in her, the ones I couldn't quite explain but could no longer overlook. First, there was her appearance. Olivia had always been beautiful, effortlessly so. She didn't need to try hard to turn heads, but over the past few months, her style had shifted. I'd always loved the way she dressed, casual yet elegant, comfortable but always with a touch of femininity. But lately, she had started to dress differently. It wasn't drastic at first. At first, it was just a few more tailored blouses, more makeup, a tighter dress here and there. Subtle changes, I told myself, but the longer I saw it, the more it felt deliberate. There was something about the way she started presenting herself, something that felt like she was trying to project a new image. One that wasn't tied to the family life we had built. She wasn't dressing for me anymore. I knew that. Could tell. Her clothes were sharper, more polished, a stark contrast to the easygoing style she once had. It was like she was stepping into a new role, one that didn't require the softness or warmth she had worn as a wife and mother. And maybe I was being paranoid, but I couldn't help but wonder if it had something to do with Ethan. Maybe it was just the campaign, the pressure to fit in with a new circle of people. But the more I saw her in these new clothes, the more I wondered if there was something more beneath the surface. Then there were the late nights. At first, I didn't think much of it. Olivia's job was demanding, and I respected that. But after a while, it became a pattern. She'd leave early in the morning, telling me about a long day ahead with meetings, speeches, or fundraisers. She'd text me a quick "I'll be home late, don't wait up" message, but it became more frequent. Nights turned into weeks where I barely saw her. I started to feel like I was married to a stranger who came home only to sleep, to rest, and then was gone again before I woke up. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. At first, I brushed it off. I told myself I was being dramatic. She was just working hard. I should be proud of her, not resentful. And yet, with each passing day, I found myself sitting alone, staring at the clock as it ticked past midnight, wondering where she was. When she did come home, it was with a quiet exhaustion that didn't leave room for conversation. She'd pass through the door, say a soft hello, and then retreat to the bathroom or her phone, often texting or taking calls with people from work. I began to wonder if she even noticed the growing distance between us. Grace and Lily started to ask questions I didn't have answers to. "Why is Mommy always working, Daddy?" Grace asked one day, her voice small as we sat at the kitchen table. "She never comes to my dance class anymore." It broke my heart to hear her ask that. Grace was growing up, and she needed her mother. But Olivia was never there for the little things anymore. No more school events, no more impromptu visits to the park. The excuses piled up, one after the other. "I'm in a meeting, honey," or "I'm just so busy with the campaign right now, sweetheart." But the girls weren't stupid. They could tell. And honestly, so could I. I felt like I was the only one left holding the family together. Still, the most unsettling change was the way Olivia spoke about Ethan. At first, she'd mentioned him casually, in passing, as part of her work. But then the mentions grew more frequent, more personal. "Ethan had this great idea today," she'd say. "Ethan said we should really focus on this issue, Liam. He's got such a vision for the future." It was always Ethan, Ethan, Ethan. And every time she said his name, something inside me twisted. I wasn't stupid. I could hear the admiration in her voice, the subtle fondness, the respect. I'd been married to Olivia long enough to know when she was genuinely excited about something. And it wasn't just the excitement of a coworker or a boss. It was something deeper, something more personal. Ethan was becoming more than just a colleague to her, and I wasn't sure what that meant for me. Or for us. One evening, I decided to follow my gut. Olivia had been gone all day, and I had the girls over at my sister's house for a quick dinner, trying to give her some space to get work done. She'd promised me she'd be home by 8, but when I texted her at 8:30 to ask where she was, I didn't get a reply. I tried again at 9, and then again at 9:30. Still nothing. My concern grew as the minutes dragged on. I could feel my anxiety mounting, my suspicions stirring. At 10 p.m., I did something I'd never done before. I grabbed my coat, kissed the girls goodnight, and drove over to the office building where Olivia had been working late more often than not. It wasn't far from our house, and I knew she'd be there. I didn't even know why I was going. I just felt like I needed to see for myself. When I arrived, the building was almost deserted. The only light in the parking lot was the glow from the security lights, casting long shadows on the pavement. I parked across the street and waited. It felt wrong, lurking in the dark, but my instincts told me I needed to see for myself. At 10:45, I saw her. Olivia walked out of the building with Ethan by her side. She was laughing at something he said, her head tilted back, eyes sparkling in a way I hadn't seen in months. She looked beautiful, radiant even, but it was different. This wasn't the woman I'd been coming home to every night. This wasn't the woman who used to hold my hand in the car or share quiet moments over dinner. She was smiling at him in a way I hadn't seen in a long time, soft, unguarded, like she was enjoying something far more than just the company of a colleague. Ethan, for his part, was clearly delighted by her attention. He was standing a little too close, laughing a little too hard at her jokes. As they reached her car, he leaned in, a casual touch on her shoulder. I saw Olivia's face soften even more, and for a brief moment, she seemed to linger in that moment, as though reluctant to let it go. My heart sank. I turned away before they saw me, my stomach heavy with the weight of the truth. Olivia wasn't just working late. She wasn't just caught up in her career. She was slipping away from me, emotionally, in a way I hadn't expected. And Ethan? He wasn't just her boss anymore. He was something more. I didn't know what to do with the information I had. I didn't know if I could confront her yet, or if I even had the right to. But I knew one thing for sure. Things weren't as they seemed, and I was no longer the one she was turning to. The distance between us wasn't just physical. It was emotional, and it was growing with every day she spent in Ethan's world. The worst part? I was beginning to wonder if I had already lost her. The night I saw Olivia and Ethan together was the beginning of the unraveling. It wasn't just the sight of them laughing, standing too close, sharing private jokes. No, it was something deeper that tore at me, a deep sense of betrayal that I couldn't ignore. I had seen the signs, the late nights, the changes in her appearance, the way she spoke about him with more affection than I was comfortable with. But nothing could have prepared me for what I discovered in the days that followed. It started innocently enough. Olivia had left her phone on the kitchen counter one morning before rushing out to a meeting with Ethan. I didn't plan to go through her things, but something inside me urged me to check. It was a fleeting thought, one I dismissed at first, but it wouldn't leave me. So I did it. I picked up her phone, unlocked it with the code she had long since stopped hiding, and began scrolling through her messages. At first, I told myself I was just looking for any sign of her stress, maybe an update on her day, but the further I scrolled, the more I found. There were messages between Olivia and Ethan, more than I could have ever imagined. I saw the friendly exchanges, the ones that were purely professional at first, but then they began to shift. There were texts with an intimacy I hadn't expected. "Can't wait to see you tonight," one said, followed by an emoji I hadn't seen Olivia use in years, a wink and a heart. Another one read, "You were incredible tonight. I feel like we're unstoppable when we're together." I felt sick to my stomach. These weren't messages between a boss and an employee. These were words exchanged between two people who were far too close. There was no denying it anymore. Olivia and Ethan had crossed a line. I scrolled further. The conversations turned from simple pleasantries into flirtatious banter, then eventually to plans to meet up. "I'll be there at 8, Ethan wrote once. "Just don't tell Liam. It'll be our little secret." My heart skipped a beat. I read it again, the words sinking into me like a cold stone. Our little secret. My hands began to shake, and I gripped the phone tighter, as if the very device could offer an explanation that would make sense of all this. There were more messages, more subtle confirmations of what I had already suspected. "I'm so glad we finally made it happen," Olivia had written after one of their meetings. "Can't stop thinking about you." I could feel the weight of those words, the deep ache in my chest. But it didn't stop there. I wasn't ready to put the phone down. I kept scrolling. As if searching for something I didn't want to find, I searched through old photos, thinking maybe there was something harmless there, maybe a picture from a work event. Instead, I found something worse. There, buried among the photos from campaign events and fundraisers, was a picture of Olivia and Ethan, taken in what looked like a hotel room. They were sitting together, faces close, laughing at something Ethan had just said. But it wasn't the laughter that caught my eye. It was the way they were sitting, so close that their bodies were touching. Olivia's hand rested on his arm, and Ethan was looking at her with that same look of adoration I had seen in their texts. A look that wasn't meant for a colleague or a friend. It was the look of someone who was in love. I felt dizzy. My breath came faster, and I had to sit down at the kitchen table to steady myself. I didn't know what to do with this knowledge. How had it gone this far without me noticing? Or worse, how had I ignored the signs for so long? But the real bombshell came when I decided to check the call history. That's when I found the recordings. I had known about Olivia's calls with Ethan. She would sometimes be on the phone with him late into the night, usually about work, but there was something different now. I found multiple calls between them that were longer than any normal work conversation should have been. I clicked on one, and as the recording played, I heard Ethan's voice first. "Olivia," he said, his voice smooth and low, "I can't stop thinking about last night. It was perfect, wasn't it? Just you and me." I froze, my stomach flipping. I hadn't heard this side of Ethan before. His voice was warm, intimate, seductive. And then Olivia responded, her voice a little breathless. "The was. I didn't know I could feel this way. I thought I was losing myself in all this work, Ethan. But with you, I feel like I'm finally alive again." I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't some innocent flirtation. This was a full-blown affair. The conversation continued, their words growing more intimate, more personal. I felt like I was intruding on something sacred, something that wasn't meant for me to hear. Olivia's laughter was so different from the laughter I'd once shared with her. This was lighter, freer, like she was a different person. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "but I need to hear you. I need you, Ethan." The weight of those words crashed over me, and I slammed the phone down on the table, unable to listen any longer. My mind was reeling. I couldn't breathe. This was it. This was the evidence I had been avoiding, the truth that had been right in front of me. Olivia wasn't just spending more time at work. She wasn't just exhausted or stressed. She was in love with Ethan. And worse, she was hiding it from me, lying to me, pretending like everything was fine, when she was falling deeper into someone else's arms. I couldn't stay still. I had to move. I had to confront her. My hands trembled as I reached for the phone again, but not to call her. I needed to be face to face with her. I needed to see the truth in her eyes. I knew this was the point of no return. Once I confronted Olivia with what I had found, there would be no going back. There would be no pretending anymore. Our life together, the one we had built for the last 15 years, would shatter into pieces. I stood up, the weight of the phone in my hand feeling heavier than ever before. I walked through the house, trying to steady my breath, trying to make sense of everything I had just uncovered. But nothing made sense. The betrayal was too much to bear. How had this happened? How had my wife, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, become someone else entirely? I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. I couldn't go on pretending. I needed answers, and I needed them now. But as I walked towards the door, a new thought crept into my mind, one that scared me more than anything else. What if Olivia wasn't the only one keeping secrets? What if I had missed something else, something bigger, something that would change everything. What if the truth I had uncovered wasn't the whole truth? I didn't know how deep the rabbit hole went. All I knew was that I was standing at the edge, and I wasn't sure I could pull myself back. The weeks after I uncovered the truth felt like I was walking through a haze. I kept the evidence of Olivia's affair close, but I didn't know what to do with it. Confronting her seemed impossible. She was still living in her world of meetings, dinners, and late-night phone calls with Ethan. I could feel the weight of what I knew pressing down on me, suffocating me, but I couldn't bring myself to break the silence. I told myself I needed time to figure things out, but deep down, I knew the time had come. I couldn't just sit back and let this happen. I wasn't going to be silent anymore. I had to make a choice: let this affair destroy everything I had worked for, or expose it and let the chips fall where they may. The final straw came one evening at a gala event. It was one of those high-profile fundraisers, the kind where everyone who is anyone shows up: politicians, businessmen, celebrities, and their spouses. Olivia had been preparing for it for weeks, getting ready to represent the campaign. Ethan would be there too, of course, right by her side, like he always was now. I was invited, but my presence was always an afterthought, just part of the usual public image they needed to maintain. I could feel the tension building up, the lies they were weaving more and more impossible to ignore. Olivia had been unusually distant in the days leading up to the event. She spent hours in front of the mirror, picking out dresses, getting her hair done, touching up her makeup like she was preparing for a role rather than an evening with her family. It was clear to me now, she wasn't preparing for an evening with me, or with our daughters. She was preparing for an evening with Ethan. When we arrived at the gala, the atmosphere was electric. Bright lights, expensive suits, glasses of champagne clinking in the air. The crowd was a blur of smiling faces, flashing cameras, and endless small talk. But all I could focus on was Olivia, her eyes alight with excitement as she greeted Ethan, standing next to him with a smile that felt too bright, too forced. The way they looked at each other, the way their hands brushed as they exchanged pleasantries, it was as if no one else existed. The realization hit me with a cold fury. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This was a full-blown relationship, a partnership that was being played out in front of the public's eye. And no one knew the truth. No one knew what was really happening between Olivia and Ethan. I couldn't take it anymore. Every laugh, every touch, every shared glance between them felt like a dagger in my chest. I wanted to confront her right there, to pull her aside and demand an explanation, but something stopped me. It wasn't fear, it was the anger that surged inside me, the feeling that I had been lied to for far too long. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. As the night went on, Olivia and Ethan spent more and more time together. They moved to a quieter part of the room, away from the crowd. I saw them leaning in close, their heads together, whispering, their faces alight with shared intimacy. Ethan's hand grazed Olivia's lower back as he spoke to her, a gesture that was entirely too intimate for a boss and an employee. I could feel my fists clenching, my body trembling with the rage I had been holding in for months. In that moment, I made a decision. I had no more patience. No more waiting. If Olivia wouldn't come clean, if she wouldn't tell the truth, then I would. Right here. Right now. I walked across the room with purpose, my steps firm, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached them, I saw the surprise in their eyes when they realized I was standing there. Olivia quickly straightened, her face flushing with an expression I couldn't place: guilt, maybe, or embarrassment. Ethan's smile faltered, and his eyes darted toward Olivia as if searching for a way out of what was coming. I didn't give them a chance to speak. I took a deep breath and addressed the room, my voice loud enough for everyone to hear, cutting through the noise of the party. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice steady, but with an edge I couldn't control. "I'd like to make something very clear. The woman standing here, my wife, Olivia, and her charming associate, Ethan, have been carrying on an affair for months. All of this, the charity events, the meetings, the late-night phone calls, isn't about work. It's about them. It's about the lies they've been telling all of you. The lies they've been telling me." I could feel the room go silent. The clinking of glasses stopped, and every head turned toward us. The gasps were immediate, the whispers starting almost instantly. I could see the shock on Olivia's face as she stood there, speechless. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, her eyes darting around the room, searching for a way to escape. Ethan, on the other hand, was trying to recover, but I could see the anger behind his eyes. He was a politician, a man used to controlling situations, but now, standing in front of everyone, he looked unprepared, off balance. "You think you can hide it, Olivia?" I continued, the words pouring out of me like a dam breaking. "You think you can smile for the cameras, put on this act for the public, and I won't notice? I've been married to you for 15 years. I know you better than anyone, but clearly, you've been too busy building a life with Ethan to care about the one we built together." Olivia's face went pale, and she opened her mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. She looked to Ethan for support, but he didn't offer her any. The silence between us stretched, heavy and suffocating, until finally, I turned to the crowd, my voice cutting through the tension. "And don't think I haven't seen what's been going on behind closed doors. I found the messages, the pictures. I've heard your phone calls, Olivia. The ones you thought I wouldn't find. I know everything." The room was filled with shock, murmurs of disbelief spreading like wildfire. I could feel the weight of their stares, some sympathetic, some judgmental, but all focused on us, on this public unraveling of our lives. Olivia finally managed to speak, her voice trembling. "Liam, this isn't what you think." "It's not." But I didn't let her finish. "No, Olivia. It's exactly what I think. You've been lying to me. To our family. You've been betraying everything we stood for. And now, you're standing here, pretending like everything's fine. It's not fine." Ethan took a step forward, his expression hardening. "Liam, this isn't the place." But I cut him off. "No. This is exactly the place. Right in front of all of your colleagues, your supporters. You've been playing the public for fools, Ethan. You're not the golden boy they think you are. You're just another liar." The scene was chaos. People were scrambling to get a picture, their phones already out, capturing the moment that would surely be plastered all over the news the next day. I didn't care. This wasn't about public opinion anymore. This was about me, about our family, and about putting an end to the lies. Olivia stood there, frozen, her eyes wide with shock, but I could see the regret creeping in, the realization that everything she had built, the career, the public image, was coming apart at the seams. She looked at me, then at Ethan, and for the first time in months, I saw vulnerability in her eyes. She knew it was over. As the crowd buzzed with whispers, I turned and walked away. I didn't need to hear the explanations. I didn't need to know what they had to say. I had exposed the truth, and the damage had been done. The facade was shattered. And as I left the gala, my heart heavy with the weight of what had just happened, I knew there was no going back. My marriage, my family, everything had changed in that one moment. The days after the gala were a blur of headlines, whispers, and a growing sense of finality. The affair had torn everything apart. The house that had once felt like a home now seemed like a prison. Olivia and I barely spoke in the weeks that followed. Our conversations, if you could call them that, were limited to legal matters, divorce papers, custody arrangements, and the inevitable fight for our daughters. I knew the moment I filed for divorce that I wasn't just ending a marriage. I was also fighting for my daughters, Grace and Lily. They were the only things that mattered now. Olivia could have her career, her public life, her affair with Ethan, but Grace and Lily were mine to protect. I knew how much the girls loved their mother, but I also knew how much they had been hurt by everything that had happened. Olivia hadn't been there for them, not when they needed her the most. She'd chosen Ethan over them, and I couldn't let her keep taking them for granted. The divorce proceedings moved faster than I'd expected. Olivia had hired the best lawyer money could buy, but the evidence I had against her, the messages, the photos, the recordings, made it clear who had been the guilty party in this mess. Her lawyer tried to argue that Olivia had been under stress from work, that her actions weren't intentional, but the court didn't buy it. I had shown them everything. I had the proof, and I wasn't going to back down. I remember the day we sat in court for the final custody hearing. Olivia was sitting across from me, her face a mask of controlled emotion. I could see the strain in her eyes, the guilt she had tried to hide for months, but it was too late for her to act like a victim. The affair, the lies, it was all out in the open. She could no longer pretend she hadn't made the choices that led to this. Grace and Lily had already made it clear where their loyalties lay. They hadn't wanted to see Olivia much after everything had come out. They had questions that I couldn't answer, at least not fully. But they had always been my girls, and they clung to me, sought comfort from me in ways I hadn't realized they needed. They wanted consistency, stability, and I promised them I would give them that no matter what. The judge's decision was swift. Full custody was awarded to me, without hesitation. The court cited Olivia's neglectful behavior, her emotional absence, and the fractured relationship she had with the girls as key factors in their decision. Olivia fought it, of course. She argued that she was still their mother, that she deserved a chance to make things right, but the damage had been done. After the ruling, there were moments where Olivia seemed to understand the severity of her situation. She sat there in silence, her head down, as if she was trying to come to terms with everything. But then there were the moments of anger, when she would lash out, blaming me for everything that had happened. It was always the same with her. She couldn't take responsibility for her actions. Everything was someone else's fault, Ethan's, mine, or the situation's. It was never about her own choices. The first few months after the divorce were difficult. Olivia made a few attempts to reach out to the girls, but I could see how forced it was. She called once a week, sometimes twice, but the conversations were always awkward. Grace and Lily didn't know how to respond. They loved her, yes, but they didn't trust her anymore. They had seen too much. They knew she had chosen Ethan over them, and no amount of phone calls or texts could erase that. I didn't make it difficult for her to see them. I wasn't trying to punish her. But I couldn't just let her walk back into their lives like nothing had happened. There needed to be boundaries, consequences. So I kept things structured. Olivia could visit them on the weekends, but only after she had shown consistency in her behavior. No more late-night work trips, no more pretending like she had everything under control when she didn't. It was painful to watch her struggle. Olivia had always been so self-assured, so confident in her ability to manage everything, but now she was unraveling. I saw it in the way she clung to the public eye, throwing herself into her career even more desperately than before, trying to regain some semblance of control. Ethan, too, seemed distant, like he was beginning to see the cracks in the life they had built together. It wasn't the grand love story he had promised her. It wasn't as easy as they'd thought. Meanwhile, I focused on Grace and Lily. We were a team now, just the three of us, and I'd do whatever it took to make sure they were okay. The first few weekends after the custody decision, Olivia would show up, always with an air of false cheer, but the girls were distant. They didn't need her like they once had. They had me, and that was enough. I could tell Olivia wasn't prepared for how quickly they had pulled away from her. She wasn't prepared for how much she had lost in the wake of her decisions. She had built this entire image of herself as a powerful, influential woman, but it had come at the cost of the one thing that mattered most, her family. Ethan had become her world, and the girls were left behind. There were moments when Olivia would break down, crying in front of me, asking for another chance, begging me to let her be a bigger part of their lives again. But I knew better. I knew the girls needed stability. They needed a parent who would put them first, not someone who could walk away at the first sign of a challenge. I wasn't angry at her anymore. I was just exhausted. In the weeks that followed, Olivia seemed to try harder, but it felt too little, too late. The girls began to retreat more and more into their own lives, focusing on school, their friends, and spending time with me. They didn't want to talk about Olivia much anymore, and when they did, it was always with a sort of distance, as if they were trying to protect themselves from the pain. I remember one night, sitting at the kitchen table with Grace and Lily, talking about their school projects and their plans for the summer. It was so normal, so peaceful, and in that moment, I realized how much I had missed. I had thought that losing Olivia would break me, but it hadn't. Losing her had made me realize just how strong I was, and how strong my girls were. They were resilient. They were adapting, and they were healing. Olivia's attempts to stay involved in their lives started to become more sporadic. She'd text a few times a week, and occasionally, she would call. But it wasn't the same. The distance between us had only grown, and it became clear to both of us that things weren't going to go back to the way they were. She had lost something irreplaceable, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't undo the damage. The affair, the betrayal, the lies, it had taken too much from us. There were times when I still felt a pang of sorrow for Olivia. She had been my partner, the woman I had trusted, the mother of my children. But in the end, she had made choices that led us here. And the saddest part of it all was that she didn't even seem to understand the depth of her loss. For the girls, life slowly began to find its rhythm again. We took weekend trips to the beach, had movie nights, and spent evenings talking about their hopes for the future. It was in those quiet moments that I realized I had made the right decision. I wasn't just protecting them from Olivia's mistakes. I was giving them a chance to grow up healthy, happy, and whole. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of sadness, especially for the girls, when they'd remember their old life with Olivia before everything fell apart. But the more time passed, the more I saw them begin to thrive. They had me. They had each other. And in the end, that was enough. Goodbye.